The desert was completely silent except for the whisper of sand against rusted metal. Jack had learned to sleep through the wind, through the groan of his shipping container fortress settling in the heat, through the memories that clawed at him in the dark. What woke him wasn't noise, it was the absence of it. The sudden, unnatural stillness that meant something was wrong. He was on his feet before his mind fully registered consciousness, rifle in hand, eyes adjusting to the pre-dawn darkness. Through the narrow observation slit, he saw it, a dark shape crumpled against a dune 50 meters out. Too small to be a vehicle. Too still to be alive. Jack's jaw tightened. 15 years in the dead zone, and he'd learned one immutable truth. Nothing good came to him across those dunes. But he went anyway, driven by instinct he'd tried to bury. As he approached, the shape resolved into a woman, designer clothes shredded by sand and sun, dark hair tangled with grit, skin burned angry red. She was barely breathing. He crouched beside her, and despite the dehydration ravaging her features, he could see she'd been beautiful. Still was, in the defiant way of things that refused to die easily. Her eyes fluttered open, brown, desperate, and completely out of place in his world of sand and silence. "Please," she whispered, her voice like gravel. "Water." Before we get into the main story, let me know in the comment section where you are watching from. Subscribe and share because I have more interesting stories to share with you. The private transport had been airborne for exactly 47 minutes when the first alarm sounded. Ani remembered because she'd been counting the minutes until she crossed into international airspace, counting the seconds until her father's reach finally ended. She'd planned this escape for 6 months, liquidating assets in careful increments, bribing the right people, timing it to coincide with her engagement announcement to a man twice her age whose only attractive quality was his family's mining empire. The pilot's voice had come through calm and professional. "Miss Okafor, we have a minor hydraulic issue. Nothing to worry about, but we'll need to land, Anne." Then the explosion. Small, surgical, deliberate. Not catastrophic enough to destroy the aircraft immediately, but devastating enough to ensure they wouldn't make it anywhere civilized. Ani had watched through the window as the desert rose up to meet them, endless, golden, utterly indifferent to the $20 million aircraft about to scar its surface. The pilot fought the controls with admirable skill, managing a crash landing that left them battered but breathing. Then he pulled a gun. "Your father sends his regards, Miss Okafor. He's willing to forgive this little rebellion if you come home quietly." She'd run. Stupid, desperate, with no plan except away. The gunshot that followed her into the dunes had been a warning. Her father wanted her alive, after all. Damaged goods were still goods. The desert swallowed her whole. Hours blurred together under the punishing sun. Ani's Valentino heels, designed for marble floors and champagne receptions, disintegrated against the sand. Her silk dress became a shroud. She'd brought nothing useful. No water, no supplies, just her phone, no signal, her passport worthless here, and the naive belief that freedom would somehow be easier than captivity. By the time the sun reached its apex, she was crawling. By the time it started its descent, she was hallucinating, seeing her father's disapproving face in the heat shimmer, hearing her mother's voice telling her she'd always been too stubborn for her own good. When she finally collapsed, face down in sand that burned like coals, Ani's last coherent thought was that this was a stupid way to die. Not dramatic, not meaningful, just thirsty and alone and utterly, pathetically unprepared. The shadow that fell over her felt like a fever dream. The voice that growled above her sounded like rocks grinding together, barely human. Then strong hands lifted her, not gently but efficiently, and the world tilted. Through cracked lips and sand-crusted lashes, Ani glimpsed her savior. A man who looked like he'd been carved from the desert itself, all hard edges and sun-scorched skin, eyes the color of desert stone assessing her with the warmth of a tactical evaluation. "Water," she begged, her voice a ruined whisper. "You'll get water when you earn it." He adjusted her weight across his shoulders like she was equipment, not a person. "Out here, princess, breathing is a privilege. You want to keep doing it, you learn the rules fast." Ani wanted to argue, to demand, to invoke her family name and the power it carried. But consciousness was slipping away, and the last thing she registered before the darkness took her was the steady, merciless rhythm of his boots against sand, carrying her toward whatever came next. In the city, Ani had been a queen. In the desert, she was cargo. And the man carrying her had clearly stopped caring about royalty a very long time ago. Ani woke to the smell of rust and motor oil, her throat raw and her head pounding like someone had used it for target practice. The ceiling above her was corrugated metal, welded into a patchwork that looked more Mad Max than human habitation. Sunlight filtered through gaps, creating slashes of brightness across darkness. She sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. Her vision swam, and a water bottle appeared in front of her face, held by a hand that looked like it had spent decades handling weapons and tools, calloused and scarred. Drink slow. You vomit, you clean it up yourself. The voice belonged to her reluctant savior. In the dim light of what appeared to be a shipping container converted into living quarters, he looked even more formidable than she remembered. Tall enough to make the 8-foot ceiling feel low, shoulders broad enough to fill doorways, and an expression that suggested smiling was a language he'd deliberately forgotten. Ani grabbed the bottle and drank greedily. The water was warm, metallic, and the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. Where am I? My home. The Iron Nest. He gestured to the space around them, walls lined with salvaged shelves holding ammunition, canned goods, and equipment she couldn't identify. A camp stove. A folding cot where she'd been lying. Everything was organized with military precision, nothing wasted, nothing decorative. You're in the dead zone, 40 miles from the nearest road, 60 from anything resembling civilization. I need to get to the border. 2. You need to not die in the next 48 hours. That's your only job right now. He turned his back on her, checking something on a battered laptop connected to what looked like a solar panel system. After that, if you're still breathing, we'll talk about where you go. I can pay you. Ani's default setting kicked in, negotiations, leverage, the assumption that everything had a price. My family has resources. Get me safely across the border, and I'll make sure you're compensated. Generously. Jack turned slowly, and the look he gave her could have frozen the desert. Your family's money means exactly nothing out here, princess. You think I lived in a shipping container for 15 years because I couldn't afford better? I'm here because I chose distance over dollars. He moved closer, and Ani instinctively pressed back against the metal wall. Here's how this works. You want water? You help me check the condensation traps. You want food? You help me maintain the solar panels. You want shelter? You pull your weight on perimeter security. I don't know how to do any of that. Then you learn. Fast. He tossed a pair of worn work boots at her feet. Men's boots, sizes too large, but better than her destroyed heels. The desert doesn't care about your resume or your trust fund. It cares if you're useful or dead. So far, you're leaning heavily toward dead. Ani stared at the boots, then at the man who clearly had zero intention of playing the role of grateful rescuer or accommodating host. In her world, people deferred, anticipated her needs, competed for her approval. This man looked at her like she was a tactical problem he was already regretting taking on. What do I call you? She asked, pulling on the boots and trying to salvage some dignity. Jack. And you? Ani. Ani. He tested the name without emotion. You've got 10 minutes to use the latrine. Outside, 50 meters north. You'll see the tarp. Then we're doing a full perimeter check. You pass out from heat exhaustion. I'm leaving you where you fall until you can stand on your own. He walked out, leaving her alone in the dim metal tomb he called home. Ani looked down at the oversized boots, at her ruined designer dress, at the unfamiliar landscape of rust and survival equipment. 24 hours ago, she'd been a billionaire's daughter. Now she was a liability in a dead man's fortress, dependent on someone who clearly preferred solitude to company. She laced the boots with shaking hands. The princess was dead. Time to see if anything useful could grow in her place. The sun was a physical weight by 9 a.m., turning the air into something visible and hostile. Ani followed Jack across the sand, her borrowed boots already filling with grit, her skin screaming beneath the long-sleeved shirt he'd wordlessly thrown at her before they left the nest. See those? Jack pointed to what looked like random pieces of scrap metal sticking out of the dunes at irregular intervals. Motion sensors. Solar-powered, linked to the system in the nest. Something crosses the perimeter. I know about it before it gets within rifle range. You're expecting company? I'm expecting the desert to kill anything stupid enough to wander into it. But sometimes stupid comes armed. He knelt beside the nearest sensor, pulling tools from his pack with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual 1,000 times. This one's offline. Sand got into the housing. Your job is to clean it while I recalibrate. He handed her a small brush and a canister of compressed air. Ani stared at them like they were artifacts from another civilization. I don't know what I'm supposed to. Figure it out. You went to university, didn't you? Apply that expensive education to basic problem solving. Jack was already elbow-deep in the sensor's guts, his hands moving with practiced precision. Sand gets in the seams, blocks the motion detector. Brush it out. Blow out what the brush misses. Don't break anything. Ani knelt in the sand, an action that would have been unthinkable 3 days ago, and started working. The brush was too stiff, then too soft. The compressed air shot sand everywhere, including into her eyes. Jack didn't look up, didn't offer guidance, just continued his work with the focus of someone who'd learned that survival meant mastering every detail. By the third sensor, Ani's hands were blistered. By the fifth, she'd stopped expecting praise or acknowledgement. By the seventh, she'd developed a rhythm: brush first, air second, check the seals, move on. Why do you live like this? She asked as they worked on the eighth sensor, the sun now directly overhead and punishing. Alone. Armed. Hiding. Jack's hands stilled for just a moment. I'm not hiding. I'm choosing. Choosing what? To punish yourself. To not be found. He sealed the sensor housing and stood, scanning the horizon with eyes that never stopped assessing threats. 15 years ago, I did work for people who paid well and asked a few questions. Tactical operations. Wet work. The kind of missions that don't make it into official records. His voice was flat, emotionless, reciting facts. Then I realized the people I was protecting were worse than the people I was killing. So I walked away. And they let you? They think I'm dead. Easier that way. He shouldered his pack and started toward the next sensor. Out here, I don't have to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die. The desert makes that choice for everyone equally. Ani watched him walk ahead. This man who'd traded human connection for sand and silence, who measured his life in water rations and perimeter checks. She looked down at her blistered hands, at the sensor she'd just cleaned, at the vast emptiness surrounding them. Does it work? She called after him. The isolation? Does it fix what's broken? Jack stopped but didn't turn around. No, but it stops you from breaking anyone else. They worked until the sun started its descent, checking and repairing sensors until Ani's vision blurred and her legs shook. When they finally returned to the iron nest, she collapsed inside the container, every muscle screaming. Jack handed her a water bottle, her ration for the evening, carefully measured. You didn't quit, he said. It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't contempt either. Would you have carried me back if I had? No. Ani drank her water slowly, tasting victory in every warm, metallic drop. She'd survived her first full day in Jack's world. Her hands were destroyed, her body was broken, and she'd learned more about true exhaustion in 8 hours than in 26 years of luxury. The princess was definitely dead. Something harder was taking her place. The alarm woke them at 0400, a soft chirp from Jack's laptop that sent him from sleep to fully armed in under 3 seconds. Ani jolted awake on her cot, disoriented, as Jack moved to the monitors with the silent efficiency of someone for whom this was muscle memory. What is it? Perimeter breach. Eastern Quadrant. His voice was clipped, professional, completely different from the gruff hermit she'd been living with for the past week. Get dressed. Dark clothes. No jewelry, nothing reflective. Ani obeyed without question, her heart hammering as she pulled on the tactical pants and long-sleeved shirt Jack had given her. Through the monitors, she could see it, a small shape moving against the pre-dawn sky, too steady to be a bird, too purposeful to be random. Drone, Jack said, already pulling weapons from concealed compartments Ani hadn't known existed. A rifle appeared, then a pistol, then something that looked military-grade and completely illegal. Quadcopter configuration. Thermal imaging, probably facial recognition. Your family's people. I don't know. Maybe. Ani's throat went dry. My father has resources, but not your father. Jack was watching the drone's movement with predatory focus. Flight patterns too tactical. This is professional. Military or private security. Someone who knows how to hunt people in hostile terrain. The drone was circling now, moving in a search grid that would eventually bring it directly over the iron nest. Jack checked his rifle, his movements economical and practiced. "I thought you were hiding from your past," Ani said. "I am. That doesn't mean I forgot how to kill." He moved to the door. "Stay inside. Stay away from the windows. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, there's a supply cache buried 50 meters southwest. Food, water, coordinates to the nearest settlement. You dig it up and you run." Jack. He was already gone, dissolving into the pre-dawn darkness like he'd been born to it. Ani watched through the monitor as he moved, not like the gruff hermit who'd been teaching her to clean sensors, but like something else entirely. A ghost. A weapon. He positioned himself on top of a dune, the rifle steady against his shoulder, his breathing controlled and invisible. The drone passed overhead. Jack tracked it with minute adjustments, waiting for the exact moment when it aligned with his position and the rising sun behind it. The shot, when it came, was barely audible, suppressed, professional, final. The drone dropped like a stone. Jack was moving before it hit the ground, reaching it in seconds, pulling it apart with hands that knew exactly where to find the memory card, the GPS transmitter, the camera module. He crushed each component methodically, then scattered the pieces across the sand. When he returned to the nest, Ani was standing by the door. "Who were you?" she asked quietly. "Really?" Jack set his rifle down, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Someone the world is better off forgetting. That drone wasn't looking for a forgotten man. It was looking for me, which means they'll send more." "I know." He moved to the laptop, pulling up maps and terrain data with practiced ease. "That drone got a partial thermal signature before I took it down. Enough to confirm human presence, not enough for positive ID. They'll send a team next. Ground units. Probably 3 to 5 operators. We should run. Get ahead of them." "No." Jack's voice was steel. "Running in the desert means dying in the desert. We stay here, use the terrain, use the fortifications I've built." He looked at her, and something in his eyes had changed. The hermit was gone, replaced by the soldier he'd been trying to bury. "You wanted to know why I live like this? Why the sensors, the weapons, the paranoia?" He gestured to the destroyed drone parts. "Because men like me eventually have to face what we ran from. I've been ready for 15 years. And me? I'm not ready for any of this. Then you better learn fast." He pulled out a pistol, checked the magazine, and held it out to her. "Because those hounds hunting you? They don't care about your name or your money either. They care about the contract. And the only thing stopping them from collecting is you learning to bite back." Ani took the pistol. It was heavier than she expected, colder, more real than anything in her previous life. Outside, the sun was rising over the dunes, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, men were coming. Trained killers with orders to retrieve her, dead or alive. And standing between her and them was a ghost who'd just remembered how to fight. The cut wasn't deep, but it was long, a jagged line across Ani's forearm where she'd caught it on exposed metal while helping Jack reinforce the nest's outer perimeter. She'd tried to hide it, wrapping it with a torn piece of cloth and continuing to work. But blood had a way of announcing itself in the desert, and Jack had noticed within minutes. "Inside. Now." His voice carried the same command he'd used when teaching her to shoot, the tone that made the argument pointless. In the dim interior of the container, Jack pulled out a medical kit that looked like it had seen combat, worn canvas, military markings faded but still visible. He worked in silence, cleaning the wound with antiseptic that burned like fire. Ani bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. "You should have told me immediately," Jack said, his hands surprisingly gentle despite the gruffness in his voice. "Out here, infection kills faster than dehydration. I didn't want to be more of a burden than I already am. Stupid pride gets people killed." He began stitching, his movements precise and practiced. "Hold still." Ani watched his face as he worked, the concentration, the careful attention to detail. The faint scars along his jawline that spoke of violence survived. This close, she could see the gray threading through his dark beard. the lines around his eyes carved by sun and survival. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked. "Combat medicine. Basic field training." He tied off a stitch, started another. "When you're deployed in places without hospitals, you learn to fix your team or watch them die. Not much of a choice." "What team?" Jack's hands paused for just a moment before continuing. "Doesn't matter. They're gone. All of them. Most." He finished the last stitch, applied antibiotic ointment, and began wrapping her arm with clean gauze. "The ones who survived found other wars to fight. I found this." Ani studied his face, seeing past the hardness to something underneath. Grief, maybe, or exhaustion so deep it had calcified into his bones. "What happened? What made you walk away?" Jack secured the bandage and sat back, his eyes distant. "We were sent to extract a corporate executive from a hostile territory. High-value target, they said. Critical to national security. We went in, eliminated the security detail, pulled him out." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "Found out later he was running an illegal mining operation. Child labor. Environmental devastation. The hostile territory was a village trying to protect their land. The security detail we killed? Local farmers with hunting rifles. The silence that followed was suffocating. We'd been lied to," Jack continued. "Not for the first time, but it was the last time I believed the mission briefings. The executive paid well. Our handlers congratulated us. And I realized I'd become exactly what I'd joined to fight against. Someone who killed for money and called it patriotism. So you ran. I disappeared. Faked my death during a training exercise. Let the ocean swallow the man I'd been." He looked at her directly then, and the pain in his eyes was raw and honest. "Out here, the only person I hurt is myself. The only lies I tell are to keep breathing. It's not redemption, but it's not damnation either." Ani flexed her bandaged arm, feeling the pull of stitches beneath. "You saved my life. Not yet. Those men hunting you are still coming. But you could have left me to die in the sand. You didn't have to bring me here, feed me, teach me." She met his gaze. "Why did you?" Jack stood, putting distance between them, his shoulders tense. "Because leaving you would have made me the man I'm trying to stop being. And I'm not ready to surrender that fight yet." He walked to the monitors, checking the perimeter sensors, retreating behind the tactical calculations that kept emotion at bay. But Ani saw the truth in the careful way he'd tended her wound, in the gentleness buried beneath all that rough survival. Jack had spent 15 years in exile, punishing himself for the blood on his hands. Maybe saving her was the first step toward forgiveness he couldn't give himself. They came at dawn, 3 figures moving with tactical precision across the dunes, weapons at the ready, communicating through hand signals Jack recognized from his own past. The perimeter sensors picked them up at 400 meters. By the time they reached 200, Jack and Ani were already in position. 2 operators flanking left and right, one straight down the center. Jack whispered from behind the reinforced metal barrier he'd constructed on the nest's eastern approach. Classic search pattern. They don't know exactly where we are, but they know the general area. Ani crouched beside him, the pistol he'd given her feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain the approaching mercenaries could hear it. "What do we do?" "We don't engage unless we have to. If they pass by, we let them." Jack's rifle was steady, tracking the center operator through his scope. "But if they find us, you shoot. You don't hesitate, you don't think about who they are or who sent them. You pull the trigger or you die. Understand? I've never." "I know. That changes today if it has to." The mercenaries were closer now, close enough that Ani could see their tactical gear. Professional, expensive, nothing like the desperate farmers Jack had described from his past. These were hunters, and she was the prey. The center operator stopped, raising his fist. The team halted instantly, and Ani watched as he pulled out some kind of handheld device. Thermal scanner, probably sweeping the area for heat signatures. "He's got us," Jack said quietly. 30 seconds before he confirms position. "When I move, you cover the left flank. Anything that moves toward us, you fire. Don't aim for center mass. Aim for the largest part of the target and squeeze, don't pull." "Jack." "No time for fear, Ani. Only action." The operator's head turned toward their position. His hand went to his radio. and Jack moved. The rifle shot echoed across the desert like thunder. The center operator dropped before he could transmit. The left flank mercenary spun toward the sound, bringing his weapon up, and Ani's training. 3 days of Jack drilling her on stance, breathing, trigger discipline, took over. She fired. The recoil shocked through her arms. The shot went wide, kicking up sand 2 feet from the mercenary. He spotted her position and returned fire, rounds pinging off the metal barrier with sounds like angry hornets. Again, Jack's voice cut through her panic. Breathe and fire. Ani squeezed the trigger. Once. Twice. The third shot caught the mercenary in the shoulder, spinning him. Jack's follow-up shot finished what she'd started. The right flank operator was already retreating, laying down covering fire as he disappeared over a dune. Jack tracked him, but didn't shoot. Let him run. He'll report back. Buy us maybe 12 hours before they send a full team. Ani stared at the 2 bodies in the sand, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped the pistol. The morning sun painted everything in gold and red, beautiful and terrible. She just killed someone. Maybe. The shoulder shot might not have been fatal. Jack's follow-up definitely was. I shot him, she whispered. You defended yourself. There's a difference. Jack was already moving, checking the bodies for intelligence, removing weapons and communication equipment with practiced efficiency. The first time's always hard, but it gets easier. I don't want it to get easier. Jack stopped, looking at her with something that might have been respectful. Good. The day it becomes easy is the day you become me. He pulled a radio from one of the bodies, crushed it under his boot. We've got until nightfall before they regroup. We need to move supplies to the secondary cache and prepare for siege conditions. Ani looked at her hands, still shaking, still holding the pistol, still belonging to someone who'd crossed a line she could never uncross. 26 years of privilege, of carefully constructed civility, of never having to choose between someone else's life and her own. All of it is meaningless in 3 seconds of violence. Does it haunt you? She asked as Jack led her back toward the nest. The people you've killed? He was quiet for a long moment. Every single one. But the alternative was being killed myself or watching my team die. So I carry the ghosts and keep breathing. He glanced back at her. Welcome to the weight, Ani. It doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger at carrying it. Behind them, the bodies lay cooling in the sand, and somewhere over the dunes, a survivor was calling for reinforcements. The war was just beginning. The satellite images Jack pulled up on his laptop showed it clearly. A thermal mass moving across the desert like the breath of hell itself. A heat wave so severe it would turn the iron nest into an oven within hours, cooking them alive inside their metal fortress. We have 2 choices, Jack said, his voice grim as he packed essential supplies into 2 tactical backpacks. Stay here and die of heat stroke, or move to the caves and hope we get there before the hounds send their full team. How far are the caves? 15 miles. Through the open desert. In heat that'll hit 120 by noon. He handed her a pack that looked impossibly heavy. We leave in 10 minutes. Take only what you can carry without stopping. Ani stared at the satellite image, at the angry red mass creeping across the screen like a living thing. And if we don't make it, then the desert wins. Like it always does. They left at 0500, moving fast through the pre-dawn darkness while the temperature was still bearable. Jack set a punishing pace, his longer strides eating up ground while Ani struggled to keep up. The pack dug into her shoulders, the straps already raising blisters despite the padding. By 0800, the sun was a physical assault. Jack called a halt at a rocky outcropping, rationing water with miserly precision. 3 sips each, no more. We're exposed out here, Ani said, scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. If they have drones. They do. That's why we move during peak heat when thermals make drone operation unreliable. Jack checked his GPS, recalculated their route. 6 more miles. We'll make it. But the heat had other plans. At 1100, with the temperature climbing past 115, Ani stumbled. Jack caught her before she hit the sand, his hands steadying her even as his own face showed the strain of the brutal conditions. I can't, she gasped. Jack, I can't keep going. Yes, you can. You've survived everything this desert has thrown at you so far. He poured a precious mouthful of water over her head, the liquid evaporating almost instantly. The caves are 4 miles northeast. For miles between us and shade, water, safety. You've walked further than that shopping in your past life. That was different. No, it wasn't. Pain is pain. Exhaustion is exhaustion. The only difference is now you don't have the option to quit. He pulled her upright, his grip firm but not cruel. You pulled that trigger 2 days ago. You survived a plane crash. You learned to shoot, to repair sensors, to exist in a place designed to kill you. For more miles is nothing. Ani wanted to collapse. Wanted to surrender to the heat and the exhaustion and the certainty that she wasn't built for this. But she looked at Jack, at the man who'd chosen exile over compromise, who'd survived 15 years in hell because the alternative was becoming a monster, and found something inside herself she didn't know existed. Stubbornness. Or maybe just spite. For miles, she repeated. For miles, Jack confirmed. They walked. The heat climbed to 122. The sand became a liquid shimmer, reality bending in waves that made navigation nearly impossible. Jack moved by compass and instinct, never wavering, never slowing beyond what Ani absolutely needed. At 1400, when Ani was certain she would die within the next 100 yards, she saw it, a shadow against the rocks, darker than the surrounding stone. The cave entrance, partially hidden by a collapsed overhang, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. They stumbled inside, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. Water trickled down the cave walls, collected in natural basins carved by centuries. Jack collapsed against the stone, his breathing labored, his usual iron control frayed by the ordeal. Ani fell beside him, every muscle screaming, her vision spotted with heat exhaustion. We made it. We survived, Jack corrected. There's a difference. He drank from one of the natural pools, then gestured for her to do the same. The hounds will wait for the heat to break before they move. Gives us maybe 18 hours to rest and fortify this position. Ani drank the cool water like a benediction. Around them, the cave stretched back into darkness, offering shelter that the iron nest never could, invisible from the air, defensible from the ground, and stocked by nature with the one resource that meant life or death in the desert. Why didn't you come here first? She asked. When you escaped your past. Why the container? Jack was quiet, staring at the cave entrance where heat shimmered like a living curtain. Because I didn't deserve comfort. Didn't deserve safety. The nest was penance. He looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. But maybe penance has an expiration date. Outside, the heat wave raged. Somewhere behind them, mercenaries were regrouping, planning their final assault. But in the cool darkness of the cave, 2 people who'd been running from different hells finally stopped long enough to catch their breath. The desert had tested them. They'd survived. What came next would test something else entirely. They came at dusk, when the heat wave finally broke and the desert became navigable again. 5 mercenaries this time, a full tactical team, heavily armed, moving with the coordinated precision of professionals who'd done this 100 times before. Jack spotted them at 800 meters through his rifle scope, the setting sun silhouetting them against the dunes. Full assault team. They're done playing cautious. He chambered around, his movements economical and deadly. This is it, Ani. They take us here, or they don't take us at all. Ani checked her pistol. A motion that had become automatic over the past weeks, muscle memory replacing hesitation. What's the plan? The cave has 2 exits. Main entrance where they'll expect us, and a back passage that leads to a depression in the dunes, soft sand, unstable, collapses under weight. Jack pulled out a small device that looked military-grade. Claymore mine. Only one left. We use it to drive them toward the back exit. You lead them into the sand trap. I provide cover from high ground. You want me to be bait. I want you to be the hunter. He met her eyes, and she saw something in them she'd never seen before, trust. You've earned this. You're not the princess who stumbled into my desert anymore. You're someone who knows how to survive it. The mercenaries were at 400 meters when Jack triggered the claymore at the main entrance. The explosion shook the cave, collapsing the entrance in a shower of rock and sand. Shouts erupted outside, confusion, anger, tactical reassessment. East exit now. Jack was already moving, and Ani followed, her heart hammering but her hands steady. They emerged onto the back slope, and Ani saw it immediately. The depression Jack had described, innocent-looking but deadly, sand so fine it would swallow a man whole if he stepped wrong. Jack positioned himself on the rocky outcropping above, rifle ready. When they come through, you run. Not away, toward them, then veer left at the last second. Make them chase you across the trap. And if they don't follow, they will. You're worth too much to them dead. He touched her shoulder briefly, the first gentle gesture she'd seen from him outside of medical necessity. Trust the sand, Ani. And trust yourself. 3 mercenaries burst from the cave opening, weapons raised, immediately spotting Ani in the fading light. She ran, not in panic but with purpose, her feet finding solid ground while her mind calculated angles and timing. Target acquired, one of them shouted. Moving to intercept. They followed, exactly as Jack predicted, their tactical formation tightening as they pursued her across the depression. Ani felt the sand shift beneath her boots, felt the barely perceptible give that meant danger. She veered left, finding the solid edge, and turned to watch. The lead mercenary realized too late. His boots broke through the surface crust, and suddenly he was sinking, the fine sand behaving like liquid. His team tried to help, stepping into the trap themselves, and within seconds all 3 were waist-deep and struggling. Jack's rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times. Clinical. Professional. Final. The remaining 2 mercenaries had stayed at the cave, smarter or more cautious. They opened fire on Jack's position, rounds sparking off rock as he returned fire with measured precision. Ani circled wide, coming at them from an unexpected angle, and when one turned toward her, she didn't hesitate. The pistol bucked in her hand. The mercenary went down. The last one ran, not retreating tactically, but genuinely fleeing, his nerve finally broken. Jack could have taken the shot, but didn't. Let him go, he called down. Let him report back that this contract isn't worth the body count. Silence settled over the desert, broken only by the whisper of wind across sand. Ani stood among the aftermath of violence, her hands surprisingly steady, her breathing controlled. She'd been tested in ways she never imagined, and she'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. Jack descended from his perch, checking the bodies with professional detachment before approaching her. You did good. Better than good. You fought like someone born to this. I wasn't born to do this. You taught me. I taught you mechanics. You found the warrior yourself. He looked toward the horizon where the last mercenary was disappearing. It's over. They won't send another team. Not after losing 2 squads to 1 target. Your father will eventually realize you're more trouble than you're worth alive. Ani should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something else, a strange hollowness, like finishing a race only to realize you had nowhere to go. What happens now? Jack was quiet, studying the desert that had been his prison and sanctuary for 15 years. I have a fuel cache. Enough to get us to the border, maybe further. You can disappear, start the life you wanted. And you? I go back to the nest. Back to the silence. Ani looked at him, this man who'd saved her life, taught her to survive, showed her strength she didn't know she possessed. Going back to the city, to civilization, suddenly felt like trading one prison for another. What if I don't want to disappear alone? Jack met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the mask completely fall away. Beneath the gruff hermit and the tactical operator was just a man, lonely, scarred, but not quite broken. Then maybe we build something new, he said quietly. Somewhere neither of our pasts can find us. The desert stretched around them, vast and indifferent and somehow, finally beautiful. 2 lost souls, found in the middle of nowhere. The vehicle Jack unearthed from its camouflaged cache was a relic, a modified land cruiser that looked like it had survived multiple wars and refused to die. He'd kept it maintained for 15 years, an escape route he'd never needed until now. They loaded it in silence, moving with the easy coordination of people who'd learned to survive together. Weapons, water, supplies. Everything that mattered condensed into 2 packs and a determination to leave the past buried in the sand. Jack paused at the nest one final time, standing in the doorway of the container that had been his home and his penance. Ani watched him from the vehicle, understanding that this was a farewell to more than just a place. It was the burial of the man who'd exiled himself here, the ghost who'd forgotten how to be human. He emerged carrying one item, a battered photo, edges worn soft by years of handling. He showed it to Ani, a younger version of himself, surrounded by men in tactical gear, all of them smiling like they believed they were invincible. My team. Before. He looked at the photo for a long moment, then set it on the sand and walked away. They deserved better than what I became. Maybe this is how I start becoming something else. They drove as the sun began its descent, painting the dunes in copper and gold. The engine rumbled beneath them, steady and reliable, carrying them toward a horizon that held no promises except distance. 50 miles from the nest, Jack stopped the vehicle at the crest of a massive dune. Below them, the desert stretched in every direction, beautiful, brutal, and completely indifferent to their existence. He pulled out a canteen, took a drink, and handed it to Ani. She drank, tasting metal and possibility, and handed it back. "Where do we go?" she asked. "South. There's a port town 300 miles from here. No extradition treaties, no questions asked if you have cash." Jack studied the horizon with the eyes of someone reading tactical terrain. "We can disappear there. New names, new lives. Together." He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his expression was almost painful. "I spent 15 years alone because I didn't think I deserved anything else. Then a lost princess stumbled into my desert and reminded me that redemption isn't something you earn, it's something you choose." His hand found hers on the seat between them. "So yes, together. If you'll have a broken-down soldier with more ghosts than prospects." Ani laced her fingers through his, calloused meeting blistered, survivor touching survivor. "I'll have the man who taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up when the desert tries to bury you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun bleed across the sky. Behind them lay the bodies of mercenaries, the ruins of the iron nest, and the wreckage of 2 lives that had needed destruction before they could be rebuilt. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the constant threat of discovery. But it also held something neither of them had possessed before: choice. "My real name isn't Jack," he said quietly. "It's Marcus. Marcus Webb. My full name is Anaya Okafor. Heiress to a fortune I'll never claim, daughter of a man who'll probably never stop looking for me. Marcus and Anaya. Starting over." "Starting over," she agreed. He started the engine, and they descended the dune, leaving behind the only home he'd known for 15 years and the only identity she'd ever possessed. The desert had stripped them both down to essentials, burned away everything that wasn't true, and forced them to discover who they were when all the armor fell away. The sun touched the horizon as they drove, and Marcus reached over, taking Ani's hand again. She held on, feeling the steady strength in his grip. Not the desperate clutch of 2 people afraid to be alone, but the deliberate connection of 2 people choosing to be together. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being lost enough to find me. For being strong enough to survive. For reminding me that exile isn't the same as peace." He squeezed her hand. "For making me believe I could be something other than the sum of my mistakes." Ani smiled, watching the desert give way to scrubland, then to the first signs of vegetation that meant they were leaving the dead zone behind. "Thank you for not leaving me to die. For teaching me that privilege isn't strength. For showing me what it means to fight for something that matters." The sky darkened to purple, then to star-filled black. They drove through the night, 2 figures in a battered land cruiser, heading toward a future neither could predict, but both were willing to face. The desert had tested them, broken them, and ultimately freed them. Now they would find out what came after survival. Together, beyond the horizon, in a world they would build from sand and choice, and the stubborn refusal to let their pasts define their futures. The lonely man and the lost lady, finally finding their way home in each other. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. Hit the subscribe button, as I will be bringing more interesting stories. Turn on your notification because you would not want to miss my story for anything.